Psycho by Robert Bloch. Read by William Hope.
Norman Bates looked up hastily, and the book slid from his hands to his ample lap. It sounded as though somebody was tapping on the window pane. Then he realized that the sound was merely rain. Late afternoon rain, striking the parlor window. Norman hadn't noticed the coming of the rain, nor the twilight. He reached over to switch on the lamp. It was one of those old-fashioned table lamps, the kind with the ornate glass shade and the crystal fringe. Mother refused to get rid of it. Norman didn't really object. He had lived in this house all his life, and there was something reassuring about being surrounded by familiar things. The light shone down on his plump face, reflecting from his rimless glasses, bathing the pinkness of his scalp beneath the thinning sandy hair as he bent his head to resume reading. He became aware of the footsteps without even hearing them. He didn't even have to look up to know she was there. "Norman, do you know what time it is?" He sighed and closed the book and glanced down at his wristwatch. "Little after 5, he said. "I didn't realize it was so late. I've been reading. I can see what you've been doing." She was over at the window now. "Why didn't you turn the sign on when it got dark? And why aren't you up at the office where you belong?" "Well," he said, "I didn't expect there'd be any traffic in this kind of weather." "Nonsense. That's just the time you're likely to get some business. Lots of folks don't care to drive when it's raining." "But everyone takes the new highway, Mother." Norman felt the bitterness welling up into his throat until he could taste it. "I told you how it would be when we got that tip that they were moving the highway. You could have sold the motel then. We could have bought all kinds of land over there for a song, closer to Fairvale, too. But you never listen to me, do you? It's always what you want and what you think. You make me sick." "Do I, boy?" 40 years old, and she called him boy. "I make you sick, eh?" "Well, I think not. You make yourself sick. I know why you didn't bother to switch on the sign. It's just that you don't want anyone to come. You hate people. You're afraid of them, aren't you? Always have been. Rather snuggle up in a chair and read. You did it 30 years ago, and you're still doing it now, hiding away under the covers of a book." "At least I never went out and got into trouble," he said. "Isn't it better to improve my mind?" "Ha!" He could sense her standing behind him now, staring down. "Call that improvement? I know the sort of thing you read. Trash. And worse than trash. This happens to be a history of the Inca civilization. I'll just bet it is. And I'll just bet it's crammed full with nasty bits about those dirty savages. Like the one you had about the South Seas. Oh, you didn't think I knew about that one, did you? Well, you can read all the books in the world, and you'll still be the same. You're a mama's boy. A big, fat, overgrown mama's boy." Norman stood up slowly. The vileness in his mouth made him choke. In a moment he'd have to cry to think that she could still do this to him even now. He didn't dare trust himself to turn and face her, not yet. Be very, very calm, he told himself. She's an old woman and not quite right in the head. Tell her to go back to her room and lie down. That's where she belongs. And she'd better go there fast, because if she doesn't... He started to swing round, his mouth framing the phrases, when the buzzer sounded. That was a signal. It meant somebody had driven in, up at the motel, and was ringing for service. Mary Crane switched on the windshield wiper and the headlights. It had gotten quite dark suddenly, and the road ahead was only a vague blur between the trees. She couldn't recall a stretch of trees the last time she'd driven this way. She was tired out from 18 hours of steady driving, but she could still sense that something was wrong. She remembered how she'd hesitated back there about a half-hour ago when she came to a fork in the road. That was it. She'd taken the wrong turn, and now God knows where she was, with this rain coming down and everything pitch black outside. Get a grip on yourself now, she told herself. You can't afford to be panicky. The worst part of it is over. It was true. The worst part had come yesterday afternoon when she stole the money. She had been standing in Mr. Lowry's office when old Tommy Cassidy hauled out that big green bundle of bills and put them down on the desk. $40,000. Tommy Cassidy had put them down just like that as he announced he was closing the deal and buying a house as his daughter's wedding present. Mr. Lowry pretended to be just as casual, but after Cassidy went away he got a little bit excited. His hands were trembling as he scooped up the money, put it into a big brown envelope, and sealed the flap. "Here," he said to her. "Take it over to the bank. It's almost 4 o'clock, but I'm sure Gilbert will let you make a deposit." He paused, staring at her. "What's the matter, Miss Crane? Don't you feel well?" "I seem to have one of my headaches, Mr. Lowry," she said. "I was just going to ask if I could take the rest of the afternoon off. We can't make out the rest of the forms on this deal until Monday." Mr. Lowry smiled at her. 5% of 40,000 was $2,000. He could afford to be generous. "Of course, Miss Crane. You just make this deposit, then run along home. That's the ticket. See you Monday, then. Take it easy. That's what I always say." Mary Crane smiled at him sweetly, then walked out of his office and out of his life, taking the $40,000 with her. Mary hated old man Lowry. She watched him take his steady 5% on every sale he made. People were always buying, always selling. All Lowry did was stand in the middle. She hated him and hated a lot of the buyers and sellers because they were rich, too. Tommy Cassidy was one of the worst. He thought nothing of laying down $40,000 in cash to buy his daughter a home for a wedding present. Any more than he thought anything about laying down a $100 bill on Mary Crane's desk one afternoon about 6 months ago, and suggesting she take a little trip with him for the weekend. It had been done so quickly with such a bland smirk that she didn't have time to get angry. Then Mr. Lowry came in. Cassidy never repeated the offer, but she didn't forget the wet-lipped smile on his fat old face. This world belonged to the Tommy Cassidys. They owned the property and they set the prices. 40,000 for a daughter's wedding gift and $100 for 3 days' rental of the body of Mary Crane. So she took the $40,000. Subconsciously, she must have been dreaming about just such an opportunity for a long, long time. Because now everything seemed to fall into place, as though part of a preconceived plan. It was Friday afternoon. The banks would be closed tomorrow, and that meant Lowry wouldn't get around to checking on her activities until Monday, when she didn't show up at the office. Her sister, Lila, with whom she shared a small apartment, had departed early in the morning for Dallas, and she wouldn't be back till Monday either. Mary drove right to the apartment and packed. Not everything, just her best clothes in the suitcase and the small overnight bag. She wished that she could write her sister a note of some kind, but she didn't dare. Maybe something could be worked out later on. Mary left the apartment around 7. An hour later she drove in under an OK used car sign and traded her sedan for a coupe. Early the next morning she repeated the performance in a town 400 miles north. Around noon she traded again. The important thing was to cover her trail as far as Fairvale. Once there, she could drive further north, maybe as far as Springfield, and sell the last car under her name. How would the authorities trace the whereabouts of a Mrs. Sam Loomis, living in a town 100 miles from there? Because she intended to become Mrs. Sam Loomis, and quickly. She'd walk in on Sam with this story about coming into an inheritance. Not $40,000, that would be too large a sum, but maybe she'd say it was 15. They'd be married at once. She'd have his name then, Mrs. Sam Loomis, wife of the proprietor of a hardware store in a town 800 miles away from the Lowry Agency. The Lowry Agency didn't even know of Sam's existence. Mary had met him on vacation. He was pretty much on the quiet side, but she loved him. He'd inherited the hardware business from his father, plus about $20,000 in debts. Sam's father had never told him about his little side investments in the market or the racetrack. There were only two choices: go into bankruptcy or try and work off the obligations. Sam chose the latter course. "It's a good business," he explained. "With any kind of decent management, there's a steady 8,000 or 10,000 a year to be made. Got over 4,000 paid off already. I figure another 2 years and I'll be clear. It isn't easy, but I got the respect of Fairvale. I want to keep that for myself and for the business, and for us in the future. When we get married, I want us to have a decent home, nice things. You'll just have to be patient, darling." So, she was patient. She'd driven up to visit him last summer. She saw the town, the store, the fresh figures in the ledger. In 2 years, Mary would be 29. She knew there wouldn't be many more Sam Loomises in her life. On the scale map, it was a mere 4 inches to Fairvale, but it had taken her 18 hours to get this far. 18 hours of fighting the road and the wheel and the dulling, deadly onslaught of her own fatigue. Now she had missed her turn. It was raining, and she was lost. The thing to do was to stay over somewhere, get a decent rest, and arrive in Fairvale tomorrow, alert and refreshed. Mary nodded to herself, resisting the impulse to close her eyes, then jerked awake. That's when she saw the sign, "Motel, Vacancy." It was unlit, but maybe they'd just forgotten to switch it on. The entire motel was dark, but as she drove in, she felt her tires roll over one of those electric signal cables. Now she could see the house on the hillside behind the motel. Probably the proprietor was up there. He'd come down in a moment. She switched off the ignition and waited. All at once she could hear the sullen patter of the rain and sense the sigh of the wind behind it. She was alone in the dark. The money wouldn't help her, and Sam wouldn't help her, because she'd taken the wrong turn back there, and she was on a strange road. But no help for it. She'd made her grave, and now she must lie in it. Why did she think that? It wasn't grave. It was bed. She was still trying to puzzle it out when the big dark shadow emerged out of the other shadows and opened her car door. "Looking for a room?" Mary made up her mind very quickly, once she saw the fat, bespectacled face and heard the soft, hesitant voice. There wouldn't be any trouble. She nodded, climbed out of the car, and followed him to the door of the office. He unlocked it and switched on the light. "Sorry I didn't get down sooner. I've been up at the house. Mother isn't very well." He bent over the ledger on the counter. "Our rooms are $7, single. Would you like to take a look first?" "That won't be necessary," she said. He pushed the register forward and held out a pen. For a moment she hesitated, then wrote a name. Jane Wilson, and an address, San Antonio, Texas. She couldn't very well do anything about the Texas plates on the car. "I'll get your bags," he said. She followed him outside again. The money was in the glove compartment, still in the same big envelope. maybe the best thing to do was leave it there. She'd locked the car, and nobody would disturb it. He carried the bags over to the room next to the office. It was plain but adequate. She noted the shower stall in the bathroom. Actually, she would have preferred a tub, but this would do. Everything all right? She nodded. Is there anywhere around here that I can get a bite to eat? Well, let's see now, he said. Your best bet would be Fairvale. It's about 17-18 miles away. You keep going up the road till you get to a country trunk, turn right, and hit the main highway again. I'm surprised you didn't go through that way if you're heading north. I got lost, she said. The fat man nodded and sighed. I thought as much. He stood in the doorway, pursing his lips, then cleared his throat apologetically. Miss? I was just thinking, maybe you don't feel like driving all that way in this rain. I mean, I was just going to fix a little snack for myself up at the house. You'd be welcome to join me. Oh, I couldn't do that. No trouble at all. I was only going to set out some cold cuts and coffee. If that's all right with you, I'll just run along and get things ready. Thank you very much, Mr. Bates, Norman Bates. He backed against the door, bumping his shoulder. Look, I'll leave you this flashlight for when you come up. You probably want to get out of those wet things first. He turned away, but not before she caught a glimpse of his reddened face. Why, he was actually embarrassed. 15 minutes later, she was knocking on the door of the big frame house on the hillside. A single lamp shone from the unshaded parlor window, and a brighter reflection blazed from upstairs. But there was no response. She rapped again and peered through the window. She hadn't dreamed such places still existed. The floral wallpaper, the dark, heavy mahogany woodwork, the turkey-red carpet, the high-backed, overstuffed furniture, and the paneled fireplace were straight out of the gay 90s. There wasn't even a television set. But she did notice an old wind-up gramophone. Now she could detect a low murmur of voices, and at first she thought it might be coming from the gramophone's bell-shaped horn. Then she identified the source of the sound. It was coming from upstairs, from the lighted room. Mary knocked again, using the end of the flashlight. A moment later she saw Mr. Bates descending the stairs. He came to the door and opened it. Sorry, he said. I was just tucking Mother in for the night. Sometimes she's apt to be a bit difficult. He lowered his voice. Actually, she's not sick, not physically, that is. But sometimes she gets these spells. He smiled. Here, let me take your coat. Now, if you'll come this way, I hope you don't mind eating in the kitchen. Everything's all ready for us. Sit right down, I'll pour the coffee. The kitchen was as old-fashioned as the parlor. A big wood stove squatted in one corner, and the long wooden table bore a display of sausage, cheese, and homemade pickles in glass dishes on the checkered cloth. There was a hand-crocheted motto on the wall, God bless our home. Mr. Bates helped her fill her plate. She was hungry, and ate with such absorption that she scarcely noticed how little he was eating. When she did, she was faintly embarrassed. But you haven't touched a thing. I'll bet you really had your own supper earlier. No, I didn't. I'm not very hungry. He refilled her coffee cup. I'm afraid Mother gets me a little upset sometimes. You live here all alone, the two of you? It must be pretty hard on you. I'm not complaining. He adjusted the rimless spectacles. My father went away when I was still a baby. Mother took care of me all alone. There was enough money to keep us going, I guess, until I grew up. Then she mortgaged the house, sold the farmland, and built this motel. We ran it together, and it was a good thing until the new highway cut us off. Now it's my turn to take care of her. But sometimes it isn't so easy. And you've never married? His face reddened, and Mary bit her lip. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask personal questions. Well, that's all right. I've never married. Mother was funny about those things. I've never even sat at a table with a girl like this before. Sounds odd, doesn't it, in this day and age? Mary fished in her purse for cigarettes and offered the package to Mr. Bates. He shook his head. No, thank you, he said. I don't smoke. Mind if I do? Oh, not at all. He hesitated. I'd like to offer you a drink, but Mother doesn't approve of liquor in the house. Mary leaned back, inhaling. Suddenly she felt expansive. Funny what a little warmth, a little rest, a little food could do. Perhaps it was listening to Mr. Bates which had altered her mood. He was the lonely, wretched, and fearful one, really. You aren't allowed to smoke, she said. You aren't allowed to drink? You aren't allowed to see any girls? Just what do you do besides run the motel and attend to your mother? Apparently, he was unconscious of her tone of voice. Oh, I read quite a lot, and there are other hobbies. He glanced up at a wall shelf, and she followed his gaze. A stuffed squirrel peered down at them. Hunting? She asked. Well, no, just taxidermy. Mother doesn't want me to handle firearms. Mr. Bates, said Mary, you'll pardon me for saying this, but how long do you intend to go on this way? You're a grown man. I don't mean to be rude, but I understand, he said. I know what psychologists say about such things. But I have a duty to my mother. Wouldn't you perhaps be fulfilling that duty to her and to yourself as well if you arranged to put her in an institution? She's not crazy. The voice wasn't soft and apologetic any longer, and the pudgy man was on his feet, his hands sweeping a cup from the table to shatter on the floor. She's not crazy, he repeated. No matter what you think or anybody thinks, no matter what the books say or what those doctors would say out at the asylum, they'd certify her and lock her away if they could, I know. If she's a little odd now, it's my fault. I'm responsible. When she came to me that time, told me she wanted to get married again, I'm the one who stopped her. You don't have to tell me about possessiveness. I was worse than she could ever be. 10 times crazier, if that's the word you want to use. They'd have locked me up in a minute if they knew the way I carried on. Who are you to say a person should be put away? I think perhaps all of us go a little crazy at times. He stopped, out of breath. Mary stood up. I'm sorry, she said softly. Really, I am. I want to apologize. I had no right to say what I did. Mary picked up her purse. I'll be running along now. It's getting late. Please don't go, he said. I thought perhaps we could talk a while. Why, I'm sorry I made such a fuss. It isn't that, she said. I'm really very tired. Oh, all right, then. I'll walk down with you. I've got to close up the office. The rain had stopped, but the night was still dark and starless. As she followed him down the pathway, she glanced back at the house. The upstairs light still burned, and Mary wondered if the old woman was awake, if she had listened to their conversation, heard the final outburst. Mr. Bates halted before her door, waited until she had unlocked it. Good night, he said. Sleep well. Thank you, she said, and thanks for the hospitality. She closed the door and locked it. She could hear his retreating footsteps, then the click as he entered the office next door. All at once she didn't feel 7 feet tall anymore. What was it that Mr. Bates had said when he got so hysterical, which had really deflated her? I think perhaps all of us go a little crazy at times. Mary sat down on the bed. Yes, it was true. just as she'd gone crazy yesterday afternoon when she saw that money on the desk. And she'd been crazy ever since, to think she could get away with what she'd planned. She knew it now. Tomorrow was Sunday. If she left here about 9 and drove straight through, she could be back in town Monday morning early. She could deposit the money and go on to work from there. Sure, she'd be dead tired, but it wouldn't kill her, and nobody would ever know. There was the car, of course. She could tell Lila she'd started out for Fairvale, intending to surprise Sam. The car broke down. The dealer said it would need a new engine, so she decided to junk it, take this old heap instead, and come back home. The car had been worth about $700, but the price was worth paying. $700 for one's sanity? For one's safety? One's future security? Mary stood up. She'd do it. But what she was going to do right now was take a nice, long, hot shower. Get the dirt off her hide, come clean inside, come clean as snow. She stepped into the bathroom, kicking off her shoes, stooping to slip her stockings off. Then she raised her arms, pulled the dress over her head, tossed it into the next room. She unhooked her bra, swung it in an arc, let it sail. Now the panties. She stood before the mirror and took stock of herself. She had a good figure. A damned good figure. Sam would like it. It was going to be hell to wait another 2 years, but then she'd make up for lost time. She tossed her image a kiss and stepped into the shower stall. She turned the faucets on full force and let the water gush over her. The roar was deafening, and the room was beginning to steam up. That's why she didn't hear the door open, or the footsteps. At first, when the shower curtains parted, the steam obscured the face. Then she did see it there, just a face, hanging in midair like a mask. The skin had been powdered dead white, and 2 hectic spots of rouge centered on the cheekbones. A headscarf concealed the hair, and the glassy eyes stared inhumanly. But it wasn't a mask. It was the face of a crazy old woman. Mary started to scream, and then a hand appeared holding a butcher's knife. It was the knife that, a moment later, cut off her scream. And her head. The minute Norman got inside the office, he started to tremble. Too much had happened, too quickly. He needed a drink. He'd lied to the girl. It was true Mother wouldn't allow liquor in the house, but he kept a bottle down here at the motel. There were times when you had to drink, even if you knew a few ounces were enough to make you pass out. He pulled down the blinds and switched off the sign outside. Then he opened the desk drawer and pulled out the bottle. The whiskey burned, the warmth crept down his throat. It had been a mistake to invite the girl up to the house. But she was so pretty, and she'd looked so tired and forlorn. All he meant to do was talk to her. But he had done something far worse. He told Mother he was having company. Mother practically had hysterics. "If you bring her here, I'll kill the bitch." Bitch. Mother didn't talk that way. She was sick. Maybe the girl had been right. Maybe Mother should be put away. It was getting so he couldn't handle her anymore. Just getting through the meal had been an ordeal. He'd been afraid Mother would make a scene. After he'd locked the door to her room and left her up there, he kept wondering if Mother would start screaming and pounding. But she had kept very quiet. Probably she'd been listening. You could lock Mother up, but you couldn't keep her from listening. He heard a sound, and shifted quickly in his chair. It must be that girl in the next room. Yes, he could hear her now. She was getting ready for bed. Jane Wilson of San Antonio, Texas. Tomorrow she'd be gone. He wondered where she was going, what kind of person she really was inside. He could fall in love with a girl like that. Yes, he could. It was nothing to laugh at, but she'd laugh, probably. That's the way girls were. They always laughed, because they were bitches. Norman took another drink. He could feel the wetness trickle down his chin. All right, he was drunk. What did it matter? As long as Mother didn't know. As long as the girl didn't know. He reached out his hand. He knew what he was going to do. He was going to tilt the framed license on the wall to one side and peek through the little hole he drilled long ago. The hole was just a crack in the plaster on the other side, but he could see through it into the lighted bathroom. Let the bitches laugh at him. He knew more about them than they ever dreamed. The girl was in there now, smiling, fluffing out her hair. She stooped, sliding down her stockings, and as she straightened up, yes, she was going to do it. The dress was coming off over her head. He could see the bra and the panties. She was unhooking the bra. She mustn't stop now. She mustn't turn away. Now she was standing in front of the mirror, swaying back and forth, and the mirror was all wavy lines and lights that made him dizzy. Did she know? Did she want him to watch? The bitch! He wanted to scream at her to stop, because this was an evil, perverted thing she was doing, and that's what the bitches did to you. They perverted you, and she was a bitch. They were all bitches. Suddenly she was gone, and there was only a roaring. It welled up, shook the wall, drowned out the words and the thoughts. It was coming from inside his head, and he fell back in the chair. I'm drunk, he told himself. I'm passing out. But that was not entirely so. Somewhere inside the roaring he heard another sound. The office door was opening. How could that be? He'd locked it, hadn't he? But he didn't dare open his eyes, because he knew. Mother had keys, too. She had a key to her room. She had a key to the house. She had a key to the office. And she was standing there now, looking down at him. He slumped back, hoping she would think he'd fallen asleep. Norman came to with a start, jerking his head back. Oh, God, it ached. Everything was pounding, roaring. He'd heard the same sound before. How long ago? An hour? 2 hours? Now he recognized it. The shower was going next door. But the girl couldn't still be in there, could she? He reached forward, tilting the framed license on the wall. His eyes squinted and then focused on the brightly lit bathroom beyond. It was empty. The shower curtains were closed. Maybe she'd forgotten about the shower and gone to bed. It seemed odd that she could sleep with the water running full force that way. Norman scanned the bathroom once again, then noticed the floor. Water was trickling across the white tiles. Or was it water? Water isn't pink. Water doesn't have tiny threads of red in it. Norman grabbed up his keys and hurried out of the office. Well, she must have slipped in the shower and hurt herself. He found the right key for the adjoining unit and opened the door. The bedroom was empty. He'd have to go in there. He entered the bathroom and ripped back the shower curtains. He stared down at the hacked and twisted thing sprawled on the floor. and realized that Mother had used her keys. Norman went back up to the house. His clothes were a mess, blood on them, of course, and water, and then he'd been sick all over the bathroom floor. The front door was unlocked. He mounted the stairs. The door to Mother's room stood open. He didn't bother to knock. No need to pretend any more. She couldn't get away with this. The bedroom was empty. He could see the rumpled indentation where she had lain. Smell the faint, musty scent still in the room. But Mother was gone. He stepped over to the closet. One of her dresses and a headscarf were balled up on the floor. He stooped to retrieve them, then shivered in revulsion as he noted the dark stains of blood. He couldn't call the police. Not even now, knowing what she'd done, because she wasn't responsible. You aren't really a murderer when you're sick in the head. He couldn't see Mother locked up in one of those awful holes, a state hospital. Right now, he was safe. The police didn't even know about Mother. She stayed here, in the house, and nobody knew. All he had to do was think back to the events of the evening, think carefully. The girl had driven in alone, said she'd been on the road all day. She didn't seem to know where Fairvale was, so the chances were she had no intention of seeing anyone around here. If anyone was expecting her, they must live some distance further north. She had signed the register, of course, but if anybody asked, he'd say that she'd spent the night and driven on. All he had to do was get rid of the body and the car and make sure that everything was cleaned up. It wouldn't be pleasant, but he knew just how to do it. And it would save Mother. Norman grabbed an old shirt and a pair of coveralls from the hook in the back hallway, then shed his clothing in the kitchen and donned the others. He could see more of the pink stains at the sink, a few traces of rouge and powder, too. Mother had remembered to wash when she came back. He made a mental note to clean everything thoroughly later. Then he went down to the fruit cellar and found an old oilcloth and a discarded clothes hamper. It was large enough and would do nicely. Nicely? He winced, then took a deep breath. This was no time to be self-conscious. One had to be very practical, very calm. He tossed his clothes into the hamper. Then he went back upstairs, snapped off the kitchen and hall lights, and let himself out of the house in darkness. A dead girl. The girl his mother had killed. Not a pretty sight nor a pretty notion, but there it was. He needn't feel guilty about it. But Norman couldn't hold back his nausea when it came to actually going into the shower stall and doing what must be done. He found the knife almost at once. It was under the torso, and dropped it into the hamper. He had to put on gloves before he could bring himself to touch the rest. The head was the worst. Nothing else was severed, only slashed, and he had to fold the limbs before he could wrap the body in the oilcloth and crowd it down into the hamper. Then he slammed the lid shut. He lugged the hamper out into the bedroom, then found the girl's car keys in her purse. He opened the door and scanned the road for passing headlights. Nothing was coming. Sweating with fear, he managed to open the trunk of the car and place the hamper inside. Then he was back in the room again, picking up the clothing and shoving it into the overnight bag and suitcase. He found the shoes, the stockings, the bra, the panties. Touching those was the worst. If there'd been anything left in his stomach, it would have come up then. And now what? Kleenex, hairpins, all the little things a woman leaves scattered around. Yes, and her purse. It had some money in it, but he didn't want the money. He just wanted to get rid of everything. He put the 2 bags in the car, then locked the door of the room. Again he scanned the roadway. All clear. Norman started the motor and switched on the lights. Without the lights, he'd never be able to make it up the slope behind the motel and through the field. There was a rutted path here, worn by tire tracks. Every few months, Norman took his own car along this route, hitching up the trailer to collect firewood from the woods bordering the swamp. That's what he'd do tomorrow, first thing. Then his own tire marks would cover these. At the edge of the swamp, he switched off the lights. Shifting into reverse, he jumped out and let the car back down into the muddy quagmire. The slope would show tire tracks too, and he must remember to smooth away the traces. But that wasn't important just now. As long as the car sank, he could see the muck bubbling up over the wheels. It had to sink. The ooze reached the door handles. It was coming up over the side glass and the windshield, inch by silent inch. Now, only the top was visible. Suddenly, there was a sucking noise, a nasty plop, and the car was gone. Norman turned away with a grimace. That part was finished, but there were other things to do. He did them almost mechanically. There was soap and detergent in the office, a brush and a pail. He went over the bathroom inch by inch. Then he inspected the bedroom once more. Just under the bed he found an earring. The other one might be around somewhere. Norman was weary, but he searched. It wasn't anywhere in the room, so it must either be in her baggage or still attached to her ear. In either case, it didn't matter. He would throw this one in the swamp tomorrow. It was almost 2 o'clock when he finally came in. He could scarcely keep his eyes open to wash the stains from the sink top. Then he stripped himself and washed. There. He was clean again. He could propel his numb body up the stairs, sink into bed, and sleep. Sitting at the kitchen table in the room behind the hardware store, Sam Loomis suddenly felt tension in the muscles at the back of his neck. Something was wrong, something he sensed, something he could almost hear. He rose, pushing back his chair. He could hear it now, a faint rattling. Somebody was turning the knob at the front door. The store was closed for the night, the shades drawn, but maybe it was some tourist. Folks in Fairvale knew he lived in the back room. If they wanted something after regular hours, they'd phone first. Well, business was business. Sam hurried down the dim aisle, fumbling in his pocket for the key. "All right," he called, "I'm opening up." She stood there in the doorway, silhouetted against the street lamp's glow. For a moment, the shock of recognition held him immobile. Then he stepped forward and his arms closed around her. "Mary," he murmured. His mouth found hers gratefully, greedily, but she stiffened, pulling away. "I'm not Mary," she gasped. "I'm Lila." "Lila? The kid? I mean, Mary's sister?" She nodded. The lamplight glinted on her hair. It was brown, much lighter than Mary's. Now he could see the difference in the shape of the snub nose, the higher angle of the cheekbones. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's this light. Come inside, won't you?" He noticed the suitcase on the sidewalk. "Here, let me take this for you. My room's in back. Follow me." She trailed after him in silence to his makeshift living quarters. "Sit down," he invited. "Take off your coat." "Thanks. I don't intend to stay long. I've got to find a room." "You're here on a visit?" he asked. "It isn't exactly a visit," she said. "I'm looking for Mary." Sam stared at her. "Mary isn't here? Haven't seen her since she drove up last summer. What's this all about, Lila?" She avoided his gaze. "I wish I knew." Sam saw that she didn't resemble Mary at all now. She was quite another girl, a nervous, unhappy girl. Lila looked up suddenly. You weren't lying when you said Mary hasn't been here? No. I haven't even heard from her these last few weeks. I was beginning to get worried. Then you come bursting in here and... Tell me. She took a deep breath. I haven't seen Mary since a week ago. The night I left for Dallas to see some suppliers down there. I do the buying for the record shop I work in. I got in early Monday morning. Mary wasn't at the apartment. I wasn't concerned. Maybe she'd left early for work. But at noon I decided to call her at the office. Mr. Lowry answered. He said he was just getting ready to call me. He hadn't seen or heard from Mary since Friday afternoon. Wait a minute, said Sam. Are you trying to tell me that Mary has been missing for an entire week? Why didn't you get in touch with me? What about the police? Sam, the police don't know about this. And Mr. Lowry doesn't know about you. After what he told me, I agreed not to call them. But I was so worried. That's why I decided to drive up here and find out for myself. I thought maybe the two of you had planned it together. Well, planned what? Sam shouted. That's what I'd like to know. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, thin, and deeply tanned. A gray Stetson shadowed his forehead. His eyes were ice blue and ice hard. Who are you? Sam muttered. How did you get in here? Front door was unlocked, so I just stepped inside. I came here to get a little information, but I see Miss Crane already beat me to the question. The tall man moved forward, his hand extending a wallet. The name's Arbogast, Milton Arbogast. Licensed investigator? Representing the Lowry agency your girlfriend worked for? That's what I'm here for. I want to find out what you two did with the $40,000. The gray Stetson was on the table now. Arbogast stubbed his cigarette in the ashtray and immediately lighted another. He went over the story of the stolen money. Sam sighed. Look, I don't know anything about any money. The way you've explained it, not even Mr. Lowry knew that somebody was going to bring him $40,000 in cash on Friday afternoon. How could we possibly plan anything together? She could have phoned you from a pay station after she took the money. Lila bit her lip. You have no proof she took the money. You don't have any right to talk about her that way. Sorry, said Arbogast, but you're overlooking obvious facts. Mary Crane has been missing ever since she received that money. She didn't take it to the bank, she didn't hide it in the apartment, but it's gone. And she's gone. It all adds up. Lila began to sob. No, it doesn't. Somebody must have kidnapped her, somebody who knew about the money. Arbogast shrugged. Miss Crane, nobody else knew about the money. Your sister went home and packed her own bags, drove off in her own car, and she was alone. Didn't your landlady see her off? So be reasonable. I am reasonable. You're the one who doesn't make sense. Following me up here to see Mr. Loomis. What makes you think I followed you? He asked quietly. I took a look around your apartment and came across his envelope in your sister's desk. Why, it's addressed to me, Sam muttered, and rose to reach for it. Arbogast drew his hand away. There's no letter inside it, he said. But I can use it, because it's in her handwriting. As a matter of fact, I have been using it ever since Wednesday morning when I started out for here. On Wednesday? Lila dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. That's right. I was way ahead of you. The address on the envelope gave me a lead. That, plus Loomis's picture in the frame next to your sister's bed. With all my love, Sam. I put myself in your sister's place. I've just laid my hands on $40,000. I gotta get out of town fast. My natural impulse would be to come straight to Loverboy, here. Sam hit the table so hard that the cigarette butts jumped out of the ashtray. "That's about enough," he said. "So far, you haven't offered one word of proof to back up any of this." Arbogast fumbled for another cigarette. "What do you think I've been doing since Wednesday morning? That's when I found the car." "You found my sister's car?" Lila was on her feet. "Sure. I had a hunch that one of the first things she'd do would be to ditch it. So I called all the dealers and used car lots around town. I found the place, showed the guy my credentials, and he talked. Murray Crane made a fast trade with him on Friday night. I got all the info and a full description of the heap she drove out with, heading north. So I headed north too, but I couldn't go very fast. I was checking motels and used car places all along the road. It wasn't until this morning when the needle turned up in the haystack. She made a second trade early last Saturday just north of Tulsa." He took a notebook from his pocket. "It's all down here in black and white. As far as I'm concerned, she should have arrived here last Saturday night." "But she didn't," Sam said. "If you're right, and Mary did get this far, then why hasn't she been to see me? That's what I want to know. And I'm not going to wait much longer to find out. You can't do a thorough job all alone. Why not let the police in on it?" Arbogast picked up the gray Stetson. "If we could locate her without dragging in the authorities, we might save our client a lot of bad publicity. For that matter, we could save Mary Crane some grief, too. Will you give me another 24 hours? "What do you have in mind?" Sam asked. "I like to nose around this territory a bit," said Arbogast. "Visit the highway restaurants, filling stations, car dealers, motels. Maybe somebody saw her. I still think she intended to come here." "And if you don't find out in 24 hours? "Well, I'm willing to call it quits, go to the police, do the whole missing persons routine. Okay?" The phone rang in the store at 4 o'clock the following afternoon. Sam picked up the receiver. "Arbogast, thought you might be worried about me." "We were," said Sam. "We've been sitting here and waiting for you to call. What did you find out?" There was a short pause. "No dice, so far. I've covered this area from one end to the other. Right now I'm in Parnassus." "Well, that's way down the edge of the county," said Sam. "What about the highway between?" "I came out on it. I understand I can come back another way." "Yes, but there's absolutely nothing along that route. Not even a filling station." "Fellow in the restaurant here tells me there's a motel back in through there." "Oh, now come to think of it, I guess there is," said Sam. "I didn't know it was still open." "It's the last on the list. I'm coming back anyway, so I might as well stop in. Will you wait till I get there?" "We'll give you an hour," said Sam. "You can find us here at the store." It wasn't a pleasant hour. Sam was almost grateful when the late Saturday afternoon crowd came in and he had an excuse to go out front and help on the overflow. Because he was beginning to feel it now. Something had happened. Something had happened to Mary. Something. "Sam!" He turned away from the cash register, and Lila was there. She'd come out from the back room where she'd been waiting, and she was pointing at a wristwatch. "Sam, the hour's up." "I know," he said. "Let's give him a few more minutes, shall we? I've got to close up the store first, anyway." He shooed out the last straggler at 5:30, switched off the lights, got ready to lock the door. No Arbogast. "Now," Lila said, "let's go now. If you don't—" "Listen," said Sam. "It's the phone." And seconds later, "Hello? Arbogast? Where are you? You promised—" "Never mind what I promised." The investigator's voice was low. "I'm out at the motel. I've only got a minute. Listen, your girlfriend was here all right. Last Saturday night, I checked the register, got a chance to compare handwriting. She used another name, Jane Wilson,
but the car description tallies, and so does the description of the girl. I pulled my badge and gave the proprietor the stolen car routine. He got all excited. A real oddball, this guy. Name's Norman Bates. You know him?"
"No," said Sam. "I can't say I do."
"He says a girl drove in Saturday night around 6, paid in advance. It was a bad night, raining, and she was the only customer. Claims she pulled out early the next morning before he came down to open up. Lives in a house beyond a motel with his mother."
"Do you think he's telling the truth?"
"I don't know. I put a little heat on him, and he let it slip that he'd invited a girl up to the house for supper. Said that was all there was to it. His mother could verify it."
"Did you talk to her?"
"No, but I'm going to. He tried to hand me a line that she's too sick to see anyone, but I noticed her sitting at a bedroom window giving me the once-over when I drove in. So I told him I was going to have a little chat with his old lady, whether he liked it or not. He hot-footed it off to the house to tell his mother to get dressed, so you stick around till I'm finished here. See ya."
The receiver clicked and the line went dead. Sam turned to Lila and reported the conversation. "We'll know in just a little while," he said. "Now all we have to do is wait." Norman shaved only once a week, and always on a Saturday. He didn't like to shave because of the mirror. It had those wavy lines in it. All mirrors seemed to have wavy lines that hurt his eyes. He remembered how he used to enjoy looking in the mirror as a boy without any clothes. One time, Mother caught him at it and hit him on the side of the head with a big silver-handled hairbrush. He could still remember how it hurt. From then on, it seemed he got a headache every time he looked in a mirror. So after a while, he just didn't. And Mother was right. It was nasty to stare at yourself. The blubbery, fat, short, hairless arms, the big belly. When you did, you wished you were somebody else. Somebody tall and lean and handsome, like Uncle Joe Considine. "Isn't he the best-looking figure of a man you ever saw?" Mother used to remark. But Norman still hated Uncle Joe, and he wished Mother wouldn't insist on calling him that, because he wasn't any real relation at all, just a friend who came around to visit Mother. Norman blinked at his reflection as he shaved. Funny how it slipped his mind. Why, it must be almost 20 years now. Whenever he thought about Mother, he became a child again, with a child's vocabulary, frames of reference, and emotional reactions. But when he was by himself, off in a book, he was a mature individual, a man who studied history and physics, the secrets of time and space. It was like being two people, really. Being Mother's little boy had its drawbacks. On the other hand, as long as he recognized the dangers, he could cope with them. It was lucky for Mother that he knew when to be a man. It had been lucky when Uncle Joe Considine died, and it was lucky again last week when that girl came along. If he hadn't acted as an adult, Mother would be in real trouble right now. All week, he'd waited for something to go wrong. Every time a car drove into the motel driveway, he just about jumped out of his skin. On Thursday night, when the highway patrol car pulled in, he almost passed out. The officer just wanted to use the phone. Afterward, Norman was able to laugh to himself, yet at the time it wasn't a joke at all. Norman tightened his tie and left the bathroom. Mother was in her bedroom, looking out of the window again. But he wasn't ready for an argument about it. Poor, sick old lady chained to the house. Let her look if she liked. He'd taken her keys away from her. It was for her own good. Once he left, there was no way she could get out. She was safe in the house, and he was safe in the motel. Norman walked down the path and came around the corner to the office just as the towel service truck drove up. He had everything ready. He gave the driver the dirty linen and accepted the fresh supply. There was no trick to operating a motel these days. After that, Norman sat in the office, watching the roadway, riffling through the pages of a science fiction magazine. The light grew dim. Around 5 o'clock, he switched on the lamp. A car rolled up the drive, with a lone man behind the wheel. Green Buick. Texas license. That girl had come from Texas. Norman stood up and stepped behind the counter. He heard the crunch of the man's footstep on the gravel. It's just coincidence, he told himself. People drive up from Texas every day. The man was tall and thin, and he wore a gray Stetson hat.
Good evening, he said. You the proprietor here?
That's right, said Norman. Would you like a room?
Not exactly. I'm looking for a little information.
I'll be glad to help if I can. What is it you wanted to know?
I'm trying to locate a girl, the man said.
Norman's hands twitched. Everything was very quiet.
Her name is Crane, the man said. Mary Crane? I was wondering if she might have registered here.
No, said Norman. There hasn't been anybody by that name here.
You sure? This girl would have stopped over about a week ago. Last Saturday, say, or Sunday?
Positive, said Norman. I'm pretty good at remembering my customers. I didn't have anyone here over the weekend. Weather was bad in these parts.
This girl's about 27, 5'5", weight around 120, dark hair, blue eyes. She drives a 1953 Plymouth sedan, blue, with a stove-in fender on the right side.
Norman stopped listening. Why had he said there hadn't been anyone here? The man was describing the girl, all right. He knew all about her.
Doesn't the description fit anyone who's been here during the past week? It's likely she would have registered under another name. Perhaps if you let me look over your register...
Norman put his hand on the ledger. Sorry, mister. I couldn't let you do that. The man took out his wallet, flipped it open, and laid it on the counter so Norman could read the card.
Milton Arbogast, he said. Licensed investigator. I'm here on business, Mr.
Norman Bates.
Mr. Bates. I'd appreciate your cooperation. Of course, if you refuse, I can always get in touch with local authorities. I guess you know that.
Norman didn't know, but he was sure of one thing. There mustn't be any local authorities to come snooping around. He hesitated, his hand still covering the ledger. What's this all about? He asked. What did this girl do?
Stolen car,
Mr. Arbogast told him. Norman was relieved. Just a missing car. All right, he said. Help yourself. I just wanted to make sure you had a legitimate reason.
It's legitimate, all right.
Mr. Arbogast took an envelope out of his pocket and laid it down on the counter. Then he turned the ledger around and thumbed down the list of signatures. Norman saw the blunt thumb move, saw it stop, suddenly and decisively.
I thought you said something about not having customers over the weekend. How about this one? It's Jane Wilson from San Antonio. She signed in on Saturday night.
Oh, come to think of it, you're right. A pounding had started up in Norman's chest, and he knew he'd made a mistake. The detective raised his head and stared at him. Norman could see the cold eyes beneath the hat brim, the eyes that knew.
It's a girl, all right, said Mr. Arbogast. The handwriting's identical. You'd better start talking and tell me the truth. Why'd you lie about not seeing this girl?
I didn't lie, said Norman. I forgot.
You said you had a good memory. Car theft is a federal offense. You wouldn't want to be involved as an accessory, would you?
Involved? How could I be involved? Do you think I helped her steal the car?
Nobody's accusing you of anything, Mr. Bates. It's just that I need all the facts I can get. You saw her. What did she look like?
Just as you described her, I guess. I didn't really take a second look. I let her sign in, gave her a key, and that was that.
She came alone?
She came alone. She took a room. She left the next morning. She's probably 1,000 miles away by now.
Probably.
Mr. Arbogast smiled.
But let's take it just a little slower, shall we? Did anyone else see her here that night?
She was the only customer.
And you were on duty alone?
That's right.
So, you're the only one who knew she was here at all? What about the old lady? Did she see her?
What old lady?
The one up at the house. I noticed her staring out of the window when I drove in. Who is she?
That's my mother, Norman said. He had to admit it. He felt that his heart was going to beat its way through his chest. She's pretty feeble. She never comes down here anymore.
Then she doesn't see the girl.
No, she's sick. She stayed in her room when we ate sup. It slipped out just like that. Mr. Arbogast had asked the questions too fast, and when he mentioned Mother, it caught Norman off guard.
You had supper with Mary Crane up at your house?
Mr. Arbogast wasn't casual anymore.
Is there anything else that might have slipped your mind? Like, say, you and this girl coming back down here and having a little party?
No, nothing like that. How can you say such a thing? I've told you all you wanted to know. Now get out of here.
All right.
Mr. Arbogast pulled down the brim of his Stetson.
I'll be on my way. But first, I'd like to have a word with your mother.
Norman came around the counter. I tell you, she didn't even see the girl. Besides, you can't talk to her. She's very ill. I forbid you to see her.
In that case, I'll come back with a search warrant.
Mr. Arbogast lit a cigarette and threw the match in the ashtray.
You see, it isn't really the car at all. Mary Crane stole $40,000 in cash from a real estate firm in Fort Worth. That's why everything I can find out is important. That's why I'm going to insist on talking to your mother. I promise I won't say anything to upset her. Of course, if you want me to come back with a sheriff and a warrant...
No. Norman shook his head. You mustn't do that. He hesitated, but there was no way out now. $40,000. No wonder he'd asked so many questions. All right, he said. You can talk to her. But let me go up first. I don't want you busting in and getting her excited. She's not well. Not well at all. It wasn't much of a climb up the hill, but Norman thought he'd never make it. No matter what you did, you couldn't get away with it. Not by behaving like a good boy, and not by trying to behave like an adult either. When he climbed the stairs to her room, when he saw her just sitting by the window, he couldn't hold it back. He began to shake, and the sobs came tearing up out of his chest, and he put his head down against her skirt, and he told her. All right, Mother said. We'll take care of this. Just leave everything to me. $40,000, that's a lot of money. Why didn't you tell me about it? I don't know. I swear it, I didn't know. I believe you. Only he won't. He won't believe you, and he won't believe me. He probably thinks we're in it together. He closed his eyes. He couldn't look at her. Mother, what are you going to do? I'm going to get dressed. We want to be ready for your visitor, don't we? Norman couldn't move. He wanted to faint, but even that wouldn't stop what was going to happen. Mother was in the bathroom. She was getting dressed. She was putting on makeup. She was getting ready. And all at once she came gliding out, wearing the nice dress with the ruffles. She was pretty as a picture, and she smiled as she started down the stairs. Before she was halfway down, the knocking came. It was happening. Mr. Arbogast was here. Norman wanted to call out, but something was stuck in his throat. He could only listen as Mother cried gaily, "I'm coming. Just a moment now." Mother opened the door, and Mr. Arbogast walked in. He looked at her, and then he opened his mouth to say something. Her arm went out, and something glittering flashed back and forth, back and forth. Mother had found Norman's razor. Norman took a deep breath. "Mother," he said, "I'm going to ask you to give up sleeping in here for the next week or so."
"Are you out of your mind? This is my room."
"I know," said Norman. "I'm not asking you to give it up permanently, only for a little while. You see, we had a visitor here today."
"Must you talk about that?"
"I must for a moment," said Norman. Right now, he didn't want Mother making him feel like a little boy. After all, he'd had a man's job to do. It had taken a grown man to bundle the rug together downstairs and lift what was in it into the back seat of Mr. Arbogast's Buick. There had been quite a bit of blood, but it hadn't soaked through. These old shag rugs were absorbent. When he got through the field and down to the swamp, he drove along the edge away until he came to an open space. It wouldn't do to try and sink the car in the same place he'd put the other one, but this new spot was satisfactory, and he used the same method. You'd think because the Buick was a heavier car that it would sink faster, but it took 1,000,000 years, until, at last, plop, gone forever. Like that girl, and the $40,000. Where had that been? Not in her purse, certainly, and not in her bags. Maybe in the car. He should have looked. That's what he should have done. Except that if he had found it, no telling what might have happened. Most probably he would have given himself away when the detective came around. You always gave yourself away if you had a guilty conscience. That was one thing to be thankful for. He wasn't responsible for all this. Oh, he knew all about being an accessory. But he had to protect Mother. It meant protecting himself as well, but it was really Mother he was thinking about. Sooner or later, he told her, somebody will be around to inquire after him, and I'll say he came and left. I hope that'll be the end of it, but I can't take chances. Maybe they'll want to search the house.
"Let them. He won't be here."
"Neither will you."
"What are you going to do? Bury me in the swamp?"
She started to laugh. It was more like a cackle, and he knew that once she got started, she wouldn't stop. The only way to stop her was to outshout her. A week ago, Norman would never have dared, but this wasn't a week ago. "Shut up," he said, and the cackling ceased. "I mean it, Mother. I can't afford to let anyone see you. You know why as well as I do. I've got it all figured out. I'm going to take you down into the fruit cellar. You're going to stay there until I think it's safe for you to come upstairs again."
"Norman, I refuse to even discuss it any further with you. I'm not going to budge from this room."
"Then I'll have to carry you."
"Norman, you wouldn't dare."
But he did. He picked her right up off the bed and carried her downstairs, and she was light as a feather compared to Mr. Arbogast. And she smelled of perfume instead of stale cigarette smoke the way he had. Norman was startled at how easy it was once he made up his mind to go through with it. He bustled around the fruit cellar, bringing blankets for the cot, arranging the curtains on the small window so that there'd be sufficient ventilation. She was too astonished to put up a fight, just whimpered a little.
"It's like a prison cell, that's what it is. You don't love me any more, Norman, or else you wouldn't treat me this way."
"If I didn't love you," he said, "do you know where you'd be today? The state hospital for the criminally insane, that's where." He snapped out the light, wondering if his words had gotten through to her. Just as he closed the door, she answered, her voice deceptively soft in the darkness.
"Yes, Norman, I suppose you're right. But I wouldn't be there alone."
Lila Crane stood up, pushing back her chair. I'm sick of waiting, she told Sam. I should have gone straight to the police in the first place. Wait, that's all I've heard. First Mr. Lowry, then Arbogast, and now you. Because you're all thinking about the money and not about my sister. Nobody cares what happens to Mary, nobody but me. Of course I care, Sam cut in sharply. Would it ease your mind any if I called the motel and found out what's holding Arbogast up? She nodded. They went out into the store. Sam waited while the operator found the number and put the call through. Funny, he said, hanging up. Nobody answers. Then I'm going out there. No, you're not. He put his hand on her shoulder. I'm going out. You wait here in case Arbogast comes in. Sam drove fast. In exactly 42 minutes, he came back into the store again. Lila was waiting for him. Well? She asked. Funny, he said. The place was closed up. No lights in the office or in the house behind the motel. The garage was empty. I went up and banged on the door for 5 minutes straight. Looks like this Bates went away for the evening. What about Mr. Arbogast? His car wasn't there. The way I figure it is that Arbogast did find out something. It could be that he and Bates went off together. And that's why we haven't gotten any word. Look, it's after 11. Why don't you go back to your hotel and get some rest? If anyone calls or comes in, I'll call you. Chances are Arbogast has located Mary, and we'll get news by morning. But there was no news on Sunday morning. Sheriff Judge Chambers was a tall man, broad across the shoulders and paunchy at the waistline. He wore a blue serge suit, and his red, seamed neck twisted in rebellion against the restraint of a white starched collar. Sam and Lila met him as he emerged from the First Baptist Church. Once settled in his office, it took a good 20 minutes for Sam to tell their story. "Let me get this straight," said the sheriff. "This fella who came to you, this Arbogast, he showed you his credentials?" "Yes," Lila nodded. "He was a licensed investigator. And he managed to trace my sister all the way up here to that motel. That's why we're so worried now, because he never came back. When Sam drove out, there was nobody there at all." "That's funny," said Sheriff Chambers. "I know this fella Bates. He's always there. Scarcely even leaves for an hour to come into town. Why don't you let me call him now? Probably turn out he was sound asleep when you got there last night." The big red hand picked up the phone. "Don't tell him anything about the money," Sam said. "Just ask for Arbogast and see what he has to say." The sheriff nodded. "Hello? Bates? That you? This is Sheriff Chambers. Party here in town is trying to locate a fellow named Arbogast. Milton Arbogast. He's a special investigator." "Oh, he did? When was that?" "I see." "It's all right, you can tell me." "Yeah." "And he left, eh?" "Oh, you think so?" "Sure. No, there's no trouble. I guess that just about covers it. Well, thanks for the information, Bates." He hung up and swiveled around to face them. "Looks like your man headed for Chicago," he said. "Sounds like a pretty smooth operator to me." "Chicago?" Lila leaned forward. "What do you mean? What did this man Bates tell you just now?" "The same thing Arbogast told you yesterday evening when he called from there. Your sister stayed at the motel last Saturday. Called herself Jane Wilson. Let it slip that she was on her way to Chicago." "Why, she's never been there in her life," Lila said. "According to Bates, Arbogast was certain this was the girl. Everything fitted. Even checked her handwriting. Once he heard about Chicago, Bates says he took off from there like a bat out of hell.
Could be he had some idea of just what your sister was up to. 40,000 in cash is a lot of money.
Now, wait a minute, Sheriff, said Sam. You're jumping to conclusions. You've got nothing to go by except what this man Bates said over the phone just now. Couldn't he be lying? Where was he last night when I came?
Fast asleep in bed, just like I thought, the sheriff answered. Look here, I know this fella Bates. He's kind of an odd one in his way. Not too bright, but he certainly isn't the type who'd ever pull any fast ones. Why shouldn't I believe him? Particularly when I know your friend Arbogast was lying.
Lying? Said Sam. About what?
Why, when he told you he was going up to see Norman Bates's mother. Norman Bates has no mother. She's dead.
Sheriff Chambers nodded.
Quite a scandal around these parts. I'm surprised you don't remember it, Sam, but I guess you were only a kid. She built this motel with a fellow named Joe Considine. She was a widow, understand, and the talk was that she and Considine were, well, anyways, they never did get married. Something must have went wrong. Maybe she was in the family way. Maybe Considine had a wife back where he came from. But one night they both took strychnine together. Her son, this Norman Bates, he found them both. Guess it was pretty much of a shock. Way I remember it, he was laid up in the hospital for a couple of months after. Didn't even go to the funeral. But that's how I'm sure his mother is dead. Hell, I was one of the pallbearers.
Sam and Lila had dinner over at the hotel. It was not an enjoyable meal for either of them.
I'm beginning to wonder how much any of us really knows about Mary, Sam said. I'm engaged to her. You lived with her. Neither of us could believe she could take that money, and yet there's no other answer. She did take it.
Yes. Lila's voice was low. I believe that now. But she wouldn't do it for herself. Maybe she thought she could help you, help pay off your debts.
And why didn't she come to me? I wouldn't have accepted it, but if she believed I might, why didn't she come?
She did, Lila said. At least she got as far as that motel. We know she got as far as that motel. Just because Arbogast lied, that's no reason this man Bates can't be lying too. Why doesn't the sheriff at least go out there and take a look around for himself?
On what grounds? What evidence? Sam asked. You can't just go breaking in on people for no reason. You heard what he said. There's nothing to make anyone suspect Bates.
Lila frowned. That's the one thing I can't get through my head. Bates's mother. If Arbogast wanted to lie, why should he lie about a thing like that? In fact, why did he bother to call up at all? Wouldn't it have been simpler just to leave, without her even knowing he'd been to that motel? She stared at Sam. I'm beginning to get an idea. Just what did Arbogast say there at the last when he called you about Bates' mother?
He said that he'd noticed her sitting at the bedroom window when he drove in.
Maybe he wasn't lying. Maybe it was Bates who lied. Perhaps Arbogast merely assumed that the woman was Bates' mother, and when he spoke of it, Bates said yes. The point is, Arbogast saw somebody sitting in the window. Maybe that somebody was Mary. Lila, you don't think... I don't know what to think. But why not? The trail ends there at the motel. 2 people are missing. Isn't that enough?
Lila stood up, raised her face defiantly toward Sam. I don't know about you, she said, but I'm going out to that motel.
Norman knew they were coming, even before he saw them driving in. He didn't know who they'd be or what they'd look like, but he knew they were coming. Sheriff Chambers' phone call was the tip-off. It meant somebody else knew about Arbogast and the girl. They got Sheriff Chambers to call.
They sent the stranger out to snoop last night. And the next step would be to come themselves. It was inevitable. When Norman thought about that, his heart started up again. He sat there in the office all alone. There were no customers. It was beginning to cloud up, and if the storm came, he needn't expect any business. So one drink wouldn't hurt. Not if it made his heart calm down again. The first didn't really help, but the second did the trick. He was quite relaxed now. Quite relaxed. He could even take a third one if he wanted to. And then he saw the car drive in. It had nothing to distinguish it from any other car, but Norman knew right away that they were here. He gulped the drink and watched them get out. The man was ordinary-looking, and for a moment Norman wondered if he hadn't made a mistake. But then he saw the girl. It was the girl. She'd come back, out of the swamp. No, she couldn't. He looked at her again. Her hair wasn't the same color at all, really. It was brownish blonde, and she wasn't as heavy. But she looked enough like the girl to be her sister. That explained everything. This Jane Wilson, or whatever her real name was, had run away with the money. The detective came after her, and now her sister. The liquor had helped. It helped him to stand patiently behind the counter while he waited for them to come into the office. The man came up to the counter. Norman braced himself for the first question, but it wasn't what he expected. The man said, "Could we have a room, please?" Norman nodded. "Yes, would you like to?" "No," the girl said, stepping forward. She was the sister, no doubt about it. "That's not necessary. We're anxious to get into some clean clothes." It was a lie. Their clothing was fresh. But Norman smiled. "All right, it's $10, double, if you'll just sign here." He pushed the register forward. The man hesitated, then scribbled. Norman had had long practice when it came to reading names upside down. Mr. and Mrs. Sam Wright, Independence, Missouri. That was another lie. They thought they were so clever, coming in here and trying to pull their tricks on him. The girl was staring at the register now. Not at the name the man had written, but at another one at the top of the page. Jane Wilson. She didn't think he noticed when she squeezed the man's arm, but he did. "I'll give you number 1, Norman said. "Where's that?" the girl asked. "Down at the end." "How about number 6? Number 6. Norman had written it down, as he always did after each signature. Number 6 had been the room he'd given her sister. "That's up at this end," he said. "But the fan's broken." "Oh, we won't need a fan," the girl said. "Storm's coming up. It'll cool off in a hurry. Besides, 6 is our lucky number. We were married on the 6th of this month." Norman shrugged. "All right," he said. Norman took the key and escorted them next door. Then he went back to the office and took another drink. Then he tilted the license in its frame and stared through the crack in the wall into the bathroom of number 6. Of course, they were in the bedroom beyond. He couldn't see them, but he could hear them moving around, and once in a while he caught muffled phrases of their conversation. "Help if we knew what we were looking for." That was the man's voice. And then the girl's. "Anything happened, there'd be something he overlooked. Always little clues." She was walking into the bathroom now, and he was following her. She said, "With any kind of evidence at all, we could make the sheriff come out." The man was standing in the doorway of the bathroom, watching as she examined the sink. He said, "Look how clean everything is. I tell you, we better talk to him. It's our only chance." The girl had stepped out of Norman's field of vision. She was looking into the shower stall now. He could hear the curtains swishing back. The little bitch! She was just like her sister. She had to go into the shower. He waited for her to reappear, but she didn't. Instead, he heard a thumping noise. "What are you doing?" the man asked. Just reaching around the back here, behind the stall. You never know. Sam, look! I found something. She stood up, holding something in her hand. What was it? What had the little bitch found? Sam, it's an earring. One of Mary's earrings. Are you sure? I ought to know. I gave them to her myself for her birthday. She must have knocked it off when she was taking her shower and it fell over in back of the stall. Unless something else happened. Sam, what's the matter? I'm afraid something else did happen. You see this? Looks to me like dried blood. Lila, you were right. The bitch. They were all bitches. Listen to her now. Sam, we've got to get into that house. We've got to. Well, that's a job for the sheriff, the man said. This still isn't proof that Bates had anything to do with whatever did happen here. Then let's find Bates. Show this to him. Maybe we can make him talk. If he is involved, do you think he's just going to break down and confess? The smartest thing to do is to get the sheriff right now. The phone is in the office. He'd hear us. Lila paused. Listen, Sam. You stay here and talk to Bates. Tell him I'm running into town to go to the drugstore. Tell him anything, just so he doesn't get alarmed and stays put. Give me the earring, Sam. The voices faded because they were going back into the other room. Norman adjusted the license frame hastily. He heard the door slam. They were coming out of number 6. That little bitch was going to show the sheriff the earring, and he couldn't stop her. If Mother was here, she'd stop her. But Mother wasn't here. She was locked up in the fruit cellar. Mind if I come in for a few minutes? Sam asked. Wife's taking a little ride into town. She's fresh out of cigarettes. Used to have a machine here, Bates answered. But there wasn't enough call for them, so they yanked it out. He gazed over Sam's shoulder. Too bad she has to go all that way. Looks as if it's going to be raining pretty hard in a few minutes. We get much rain around here. Sam sat down on the arm of a battered sofa. Quite a bit. Bates nodded. In the dim light, the eyes behind the fat man's glasses seemed vacant. Sam caught a whiff of alcohol and noticed the bottle standing at the edge of the counter. Care for a drink? Bates asked. Don't generally drink when I'm on duty, but I was just about to pour a little one for myself when you came in. He found a shot glass under the counter, filled it, and pushed it forward. Sam rose and walked over to it. Go ahead, take a drink and sit down, Bates said. Don't worry about me. I like to stand here. It was raining hard now, and getting quite dark, but Bates made no movement to switch on any lights. Sam glanced at his watch. It would be better than 3/4 of an hour before Lila was back with the sheriff. That was a long time to stall. Bates was taking a swig out of the bottle. Sam lifted his glass. Must get pretty lonesome out here sometimes, Sam said. That's right. The bottle thumped down on the counter. Pretty lonesome. You run the whole place by yourself? That's right. Bates moved around the counter. Here, let me fill your glass. Won't hurt you. I'm not going to tell your wife. Bates chuckled. Besides, I don't like to drink alone. The man's face was only a gray blur in the growing darkness. Sam felt slightly ashamed. Bates seemed so damned ordinary. You were right, he murmured. It is raining pretty hard. I like the sound of rain, Bates said. I like the way it comes down hard. It's exciting. Never thought of it in that way, Sam said. I guess you can use a little excitement around here. I don't know, said Bates. We get our share. We? I thought you said you lived here alone. I said I operated the motel alone, but it belongs to both of us. My mother and me. Sam almost choked on the whiskey. He lowered the glass. I didn't know. Of course not. How could you? Most people think she's dead. The voice was calm. Sam couldn't see Bates's face in the dimness now, but he knew it was calm, too. Actually, there is excitement around here. Like there was 20 years ago, when Mother and Uncle Joe Considine drank the poison. I called the sheriff, and he came out and found them. Mother left a note explaining everything. I was very sick. I was in the hospital a long time. Almost too long to do any good when I got out. But I managed. Let me pour you another. His shadowy bulk loomed over Sam as he reached for the glass. I brought Mother back home with me. That was the exciting part, you see. Going out to the cemetery at night and digging up the grave. She'd been shut up in that coffin for such a long time that I thought she really was dead. But she wasn't, of course, or else she wouldn't have been able to communicate with me when I was in the hospital all that while. And I knew how to revive her. Some folks call it magic, but that's just a meaningless label. Life's like electricity, you see. It's a force which can be harnessed if you know the secret. You can turn it off and on. Off and on. I turned it off and I knew how to turn it on again. Do you understand me? Mr. Bates, Sam said, are you quite sure you're all right? I know what you mean. You think I'm drunk, don't you? But I wasn't drunk when you came here. I wasn't drunk when you found that earring and told the young lady to go to the sheriff. Sit still now. Don't be alarmed. I'm not alarmed, am I? You don't think I'd tell you all this if there was anything wrong, do you? The fat man paused. Sam tried to find the face in the darkness, but all he could hear was the voice. No, I waited until you came in. I waited until I saw her drive up the road. I waited until I saw her stop. You didn't know that she'd stop the car, did you? You thought she went on to get the sheriff, like you told her. But she has a mind of her own. Remember what she wanted to do? She wanted to take a look at the house. That's where she is. She'll be meeting Mother now. Sam rose swiftly, and the blurred bulk fell back. Get out of my way. You don't want another drink, then? Bates's voice sounded petulantly over his shoulder. Very well. Have it your own way. The end of his sentence was lost in the thunder, and the thunder was lost in the darkness as Sam felt the bottle explode against the roof of his skull. Lila went up the steps, reaching the porch just before the rain came. She could hear the wind rattling the casements of the upstairs windows. She rapped on the front door angrily. She was angry. She admitted it. A whole week of listening to take it easy, be calm, just be patient. They didn't care about Mary, not one of them. Mr. Lowry just wanted his money back when Arbogast was only doing a job. But it was Sam's reaction that really upset her. Oh, he seemed nice enough, but he had that slow, cautious, small-town outlook. Well, it wasn't hers. Not after she found the earring. How could Sam shrug it off and tell her to go get the sheriff again? There'd be something else in this house. There had to be. Lila dipped into her purse. All those gags about how a woman's purse contains everything, what kind of gags that hicks like Sam and the sheriff would appreciate. Somewhere or other she'd picked up a skeleton key. Yes, here it was. She inserted it in the lock, turned it. The lock resisted. She twisted the key sharply. It snapped at the handle, but the lock gave. She felt the door move. It was open. It was dark inside the house. She found a light switch, snapped it on. The unshaded overhead bulb gave off a sickly glare against the background of peeling wallpaper. Arbogast had said he saw someone looking out of the window upstairs. That would be the place to begin. Lila went up slowly, groping along the banister. As she reached the landing, the thunder came. Lila switched on the upstairs light. She had her choice of 3 doors to enter. The first led to the bathroom. Lila had never seen such a place. An upright bathtub on legs, open pipes under the washstand and toilet seat, a metal pull chain dangling from the high ceiling. Here was the linen closet stacked with towels and bedding. She rummaged through the shelves. Their contents told her nothing. Lila chose the second door, switched on the light. Bates's bedroom. Singularly small and cramped, with a low cot more suitable for a little boy than a grown man. There were 2 large bookshelves in the corner. She scanned the shelves rapidly. Abnormal psychology, occultism, theosophy. These were not the books of a small boy. And here on the bottom shelf an assortment of untitled volumes, poorly bound. Lila pulled one out at random and opened it. The illustration that leaped out at her was almost pathologically pornographic. She replaced the volume hastily and stood up. There was something here. She retreated to the hall and opened the dark, paneled door leading to the third room. There was a musty odor of stale perfume. She pressed the light switch, then gasped. This was the front bedroom. A room such as she thought had not existed for the past 50 years. A room that belonged in a world of gilt ormolu clocks, Dresden figurines, of china cats and overstuffed chairs covered with antimacassars. And it was still alive. Furnished more than 50 years ago, untouched since the death of its occupant 20 years ago, it was still the room of a living person. A room where, just yesterday, a woman had sat and peered out of the window. Lila turned to the closet. Coats and dresses hung in a neat row, though some were wrinkled through long lack of pressing. She started over to examine the dresser, then halted beside the bed. The bedspread was tucked in tightly at the bottom and hung perfectly over the sides, but the top was out of line, the way a spread is tucked in when a bed has been made in a hurry. She pulled back the covers. The sheets were gray and covered with little brown flecks, but the bed itself bore the unmistakable indentation made by a recent occupant, and there was a deep depression in the center of the pillow where the brown flecks were thickest. Somebody had been sleeping here, Lila told herself. And if it had been Mary, where was she now? The cellar. She had to check the cellar. With a shiver, Lila turned and left the room and went downstairs. The front door was open and the wind howled in. Lila groped her way along the downstairs hall into the kitchen. She found the light. The basement stairs were just ahead. Her hand brushed over another switch, and the light went on below. Just a faint and faltering glow in the darkened depths. Thunder growled in counterpoint to the clatter of her heels. Lila was trembling now. She'd been a fool to come here alone, but she had to do it because of Mary. In the basement, all she saw were the old-fashioned laundry tubs and a table and chair beyond them. There were bottles on the table, and an assortment of knives and needles. Lila approached the table, gazing at the knives in puzzled concentration. Then she heard the sound, a creaking from overhead. Somebody had come into the house. Somebody was tiptoeing along the hall. Somebody had closed the cellar door. She could hear the sharp click of the lock, and the footsteps moving away, going upstairs to the second floor. She was locked in the cellar, and there was no way out, nowhere to hide. The whole basement was visible to anyone descending the cellar stairs, and somebody would be coming down those stairs soon. She knew it now. Then Lila saw the second door. There must be another room here, probably an old-fashioned fruit cellar. That would be the ideal place to hide and wait. Now she could hear the faint, faraway footsteps coming down the hall again, moving into the kitchen. Lila opened the door of the fruit cellar. It was then that she screamed. She screamed when she saw the old woman lying there, the brown, wrinkled face which grinned up at her in an obscene greeting. Mrs. Bates.
Yes?
But the voice wasn't coming from those sunken, leathery jaws. It came from behind her, from the top of the cellar stairs. Lila turned to stare at the fat, shapeless figure, half concealed by the tight dress which had been pulled down to cover the garments beneath. She stared up at the shrouding shawl, at the white, painted face, and at the garishly reddened lips.
I am Norma Bates,
said the high, shrill voice. And then there was the hand coming out, the hand that held the knife, and the feet mincing down the stairs, and other feet were running, and Lila screamed again as Sam came down the stairs and grasped and twisted the hand, and the knife clattered to the floor. Lila closed her mouth, but the scream continued. It was the insane scream of a hysterical woman, and it came from the throat of Norman Bates. It took almost a week to reclaim the cars and the bodies from the swamp. The county highway crew had to come in with a dredger and hoists, but in the end, the job was done. They found the money, too, right there in the glove compartment. Funny thing, it didn't even have a speck of mud on it. Not a speck. Everybody wanted to talk to Sam, of course, but he spent part of the following week in Fort Worth with Lila, then took a run up to the state hospital where 3 psychiatrists were examining Norman Bates. The following weekend, Sam reported back to Lila with the results of his interview with Dr. Nicholas Steiner, who was in charge of the medical observation. He was reticent at first, but Lila insisted on the full details. How Mrs. Bates had dominated Norman as a boy, how he had probably been a secret transvestite long before she died, how he had poisoned her and her lover, Joe Considine, when she told him they were going to be married. It was when he was writing the suicide note that Dr. Steiner thinks it happened, Sam said. Now that it was all over, he couldn't stand the loss of his mother. He wanted her back. As he wrote the note in her handwriting, addressed to himself, he literally changed his mind. And Norman, or part of him, became his mother. The grief of his reaction was so severe nobody even thought to question the suicide pact. Both Considine and his mother were in their graves long before Norman was discharged from the hospital. "And that's when he dug her up?" Lila asked. "He had this taxidermy hobby," Sam said, "and he knew what he'd have to do. Preserving her room was not enough. Steiner says the relationship was like that of a ventriloquist and his dummy. Mother and little Norman must have carried on regular conversations, and the adult Norman rationalized the situation, went through the daily routine of running the motel. He was leading 3 lives at once, and he was getting away with it until—" Lila finished the sentence for him. "Until Mary came along, and something happened, and he killed her." "Mother killed her," said Sam. "Bates would start drinking and black out while she took over. Afterwards, he'd hide her image away, because in his mind she was the real murderer and had to be protected." "Then Steiner is quite sure he's insane?" "Yes. He's going to recommend that Bates be placed in the state hospital, probably for life." The end came quietly, in the small barred room where the voices had muttered and mingled for so long, the man's voice, the woman's voice, the child's. A fusion took place, so that there was only one voice. And that was right, because there was only one person in the room. She was glad. It was much better to be this way, to be completely aware of oneself as one really was. She could look back on the past as though it were all a bad dream. There had been a bad boy in the bad dream, who had killed her lover and tried to poison her. But the bad boy was dead, and that was as it should be. There had been a bad man in the dream, too, and he had peeked through the wall, and he drank, and he read filthy books. But worst of all, he was responsible for the deaths of 2 innocent people. A young girl with beautiful breasts and a man who wore a gray Stetson hat. The bad man had tried to blame it on her. But how could she kill them when she couldn't even move because she had to pretend to be a harmless stuffed figure that couldn't hurt or be hurt? She knew that nobody would believe the bad man, and that he was dead now, too. But just to be on the safe side, maybe it was best to keep pretending that one was a stuffed figure, not to move. If she sat there without moving, they wouldn't punish her. They'd know that she was sane. She sat there for quite a long time, and then a fly came buzzing through the bars. It lighted on her hand. If she wanted to, she could reach out and swat the fly. But she didn't swat it, and she hoped that they were watching, because that proved what sort of a person she really was. Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Psycho by Robert Bloch was read by William Hope, abridged by James Robertson and produced by David Jackson Young.